Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. I'm kind of obsessed with words of the year. And do you know what the word of the year, according to Merriam-Webster, is for 2023? Authenticity. So that's a bit of a flip. They chose gaslighting in 2022, and now it's authenticity, which may be interesting because it can give us an opportunity to sort of explore this idea of authenticity, which can be a really tricky and thorny issue when we're thinking about what happens in narcissistic relationships. Now, authenticity is like gaslighting. Most people are using the word incorrectly, but when it's used correctly, it's actually a really great word, a wonderful concept, and is actually the pathway to healing. At the most basic level, authenticity is about truth and consistency. For example, would you fly to another city, get a hotel, wait in line, buy a ticket to see a poster of a Van Gogh painting or a Basquiat painting? What your eyes see the same, whether you're seeing the real picture or not, right? It's a perfect reproduction of the image if it's a poster. But you wouldn't take the time and effort to see a poster, would you? But you may very well, if this stuff matters to you, make a big effort and tell people about seeing the real thing. Why? Because we consider it authentic. Because I found this word choice interesting, because in actuality, authenticity, in the sense of an authentic person, I actually think is the opposite of narcissism. You know, I love the research. Kernis and Goldman wrote a paper about authenticity in 2006, which I really, really like. And they break authenticity down into its components, and they even came up with a test or a scale to measure it. They believe that authenticity is comprised of different things. First, they say it involves awareness. So an authentic person, if you're authentic, you know how you feel, you know what motivates you. It's about knowing yourself, right? That sits alongside flexibility. We don't get caught up in the I am this, I am that, I am this one thing, or this is the only thing I stand for, but we recognize that we can flex with situations. The person who may be the most delightful storyteller in a small group of people at a party may also be very willing to embrace the introverted evening at home. Authentic people can flex, and they're aware. The second part of authenticity they talk about is something they call unbiased processing, which is a fancy way of saying that a person is being neither defensive or grandiose. When we integrate and process information about ourselves, if someone says, hey, Ramani, this wasn't your best work, if we're authentic, we can say and take a minute and say, yeah, you're right, instead of, how dare you? It's knowing that there are parts of us that we may not even like about ourselves. For example, if we're very stubborn, we may not like that about ourselves, but we're aware that they're there and we don't beat ourselves up over it. But it's also about being able to get a little distance and being objective about what we're about. In essence, being objective about our subjectivity. Okay, that's a little bit of a mind twist. The third piece of this is our behavior. And it really comes back to that consistency part of authenticity. That our behavior is in line with our values. So instead of just doing stuff to please or win over other people, or just to get external rewards, or just so we won't get in trouble, authentic people will behave in line with who they are and what they're about, and not being performative. And the behavior part might be the hardest part of authenticity. The last part is something they call relational orientation. And that's basically that we bring our true selves to our relationships. Feels like a risk, right? And in those relationships, we behave in an honest and balanced and self-reflective manner. In a manner that is sort of mutual. We hold that for the other person, and the authentic person always strives for balance and mutuality in their relationships. So taken together, and in their model, an authentic person is someone who feels connected to their emotions and feelings, even when they're feeling comfortable. It's about knowing who you are, knowing your motivations, your strengths, your weaknesses, your willingness to speak your truth, even when it's uncomfortable, but to do so respectfully. And you don't just go along to fit in. If you're on social media, you would portray the actual reality of your life, or more likely, you just don't post that much. And in your relationships, you let people know that you are there for them, really there for them, and actually are there for them when they need you. You see those around you clearly as well, and you don't idealize them. You are aware of what those around you need and what they are about too. You don't fake it till you make it. You show up as yourself. You stick with your values, even if that means being criticized, even if it sometimes might even mean things like less money. You have constructive arguments. You don't give in, you don't capitulate, you behave in line with your values. You're very aware of what matters to you. You can hear criticism with an open mind and integrate it non-defensively. People can count on you because you're consistent. You're honest with other people. That's sweet, right? So you might be wondering, well then, what does an inauthentic person look like? What's that? One article, that I'd read said that inauthentic people have unrealistic perceptions of reality, looking to others for approval and validation, being judgmental, not thinking things through, not learning from mistakes, and being unable to express emotions clearly or understand their motivations. That definition comes from Psychology Today. So just sit with what I just said, what an inauthentic person is. What does that sound like to you? I know what it sounds like to me, and it sounds like good old narcissism. What is also so confusing is that so many narcissistic folks think of themselves as authentic. I mean, look at the world of wellness folks out there who claim lives of kale and 6-hour meditation sessions because they're so authentic. But they're in fact a brand. Let me make this very clear to you. As soon as somebody says that authenticity is their brand, they stop being authentic. It's the whole idea of authenticity is that they're not. They're just like, I'm showing up as me. I suppose if that sells something, then that's a little bit of irony, right? But lots of communal narcissistic folks have jumped on this authenticity bandwagon, a sort of be like me. And again, according to what we know about authenticity, that's not how it works. So what's so sad is that authenticity is a very heavy lift to achieve if you're raised by a narcissistic parent or parents, only because that part of you, that true self part of you, was simply not allowed to flourish. You had to be what someone else wanted you to be to survive. And even in an adult narcissistic relationship, you may have even started somewhat authentically, but with time, your authenticity suffered because for the relationship to last, you had to lose your authenticity. Authenticity simply doesn't work in a narcissistic relationship. If you show up as your authentic self, it is a threat and it will be shut down. So your sense of comfort in yourself, your sense of centeredness, and your authenticity simply wouldn't work. However, authenticity is also an antidote, if you will, a vaccination in these relationships, because we really could, if we could really build it up, foster it, live in it, I don't think we actually could be in a narcissistic relationship. From the jump, we'd show up as our true selves. And once that was denied, mocked, shamed, or rejected, which it would be, we'd recognize that we wouldn't be able to achieve the mutual and shared space of a healthy relationship and subsequently pull back. If we were a truly authentic person and we were in the presence of a narcissistic person, it's like kryptonite. It almost sort of turns their grandiose defenses to mush. And then they would scream at us a bit and they would go away. But to be authentic in a narcissistic relationship is also scary. Because when you show up as that true self who speaks your truth, they will gaslight and shame and humiliate and threaten. I mean, you'd have to be effing Gandalf or some other wizard to just stand in that power. But in fact, authenticity isn't about power, unless you want to view it as a power of simply being comfortable in who you are. A difficult part of authenticity is that to be authentic means that we often lose people, because when we're authentic, we're no longer performative. And if we aren't jumping through hoops or don't bend to the will of others, sometimes we lose people. It doesn't necessarily mean they're narcissistic, but we may lose them. We're not doing that dance anymore. And that can make the authenticity thing really complicated. And forget social media. It's basically where authenticity goes to die. To be in that space as who we really are, especially if it's not getting clicks or views or likes, people who are authentic probably may not even be on it or have a very small footprint or perhaps only a professional one and may not be drawn into the scrolling and social comparison. To be authentic, honestly, from a psychological point of view, is to feel comfortable in yourself. And it can be undercut. Authenticity can be undercut by so many things. Narcissistic relationships, gaslighting, trauma, anxiety, the world at large. But anybody, any human being in the world can strive for it. Authenticity isn't a destination. It's a constantly evolving phenomenon within us. It's a constant 100-time-a-day calibration within ourselves. I have met some people in my life who have lived in this zone of authenticity. Some of them had even been through narcissistic relationships. Didn't stop them from being authentic. If anything, it only showed their flexibility and resilience. But these authentic people tended to have smaller social circles that were very healthy and complementary. They were clear on who they were, and they were also very clear of the harms that had happened to them. They didn't try to sugarcoat it. So when a word becomes the word of the year, whether it's gaslighting or it's authenticity, and remember, if you don't know this, a few years ago in 2019, the word of the year was toxic. All of this opens up a big kettle of fish. Authenticity, in fact, and we see it in the definition, is indeed the opposite of narcissism. But it's not as simple as whether it's a real Chanel purse, an authentic one, or a knockoff. Or if it's the chef who really says he cares authentically about farm to table, but really wants to make a fast buck. Because that's the thing that's in vogue. And ends up screwing over the farmers once he makes the buck. That's one way to view authenticity. Do your words line up to your actions? Is the thing real? But authenticity really, to me, as a shrink, is about the truth of who we are and touching into that dozens of times per day. It's to see it as a process, as something we strive for in our interactions, in our work, and how we go through the world. It's about hearing the good and the bad about ourselves and not allowing it to define us, but being curious about it. And if you can even get close to this process and really attempt to participate in it with yourself, of authenticity. Frankly, I believe it's one of the greatest narcissist resistance tools in the world. And it's also a bit of a catch-22. The narcissistic relationships are what stymied this process of authenticity for us, and yet the quest for authenticity is ultimately the one thing that can really protect us. But I have seen it happen, and in some ways it's a psychological Hail Mary pass. If you survived a person for years who told you the sky was purple and your reality doesn't exist, and endured having your identity shaved away piece by piece, if you could do that, what do you have to lose? You may lose some of the toxic and judgmental folks from your life. If you really lean into authenticity, I still think that's a win. For survivors of narcissistic abuse, it can feel like hubris to think about your authenticity. You may be told that you're selfish to want this, that you're full of yourself. But really, ultimately, it's the only way not only to be out, but to stay out. Authenticity is a good word and it's a great concept. But just like gaslighting, make sure you get it. Because if you do, it really represents the essential process and flow of healing. Hope you get there. Essential healing tool. So that's it. It's the word of the year. So maybe that's the journey we're all going to be on. Thanks again.